Hello, my name is Reiko Osoroshi. On this channel, I narrate Japanese ghost stories. Today, I will narrate Ghost Story The Mentor Series Part 6, The Mentor in a Suicide by Jumping. The previous story and Part 1's URL are provided in the description box, so please take a look. The Mentor in a Suicide by Jumping. This happened during the second year, during the rainy season. In my hometown, even though we called it the rainy season, it hardly ever rained. If it rained for 3 days during that period, it was considered a lot. However, the air was suitably humid, giving a specific kind of discomfort. On one such day, I was cycling through the muggy and oppressive air. I didn't like the rain, and I didn't like days when it looked like rain either. Consequently, the rainy season often cast a shadow on my mood. After school, on my way back home, I passed by a building. It wasn't a towering skyscraper like you'd find in a big city, more of a modest structure with up to 5 floors. As I passed it, I suddenly heard a voice from above, or at least, I thought I did. I applied the brakes and looked up. There, I saw a woman who appeared as if she were about to shout, "Ah," with her mouth wide open. Leaning over the edge of the building and seemingly about to descend. So, the woman who should have fallen wasn't there at all? Senior listened to my story with apparent delight. Yes, well, I think it has to do with wavelengths. Do you know anything about it? Yesterday, the woman who fell from the sky wasn't there from the beginning. It's a rare experience for someone like me, but people with a strong sense for these things occasionally witness lingering thoughts. I assume it was probably a video of someone who jumped in the past. You should keep an eye on the local news. Just wait a moment. Senior rummaged through the closet with his head inside. Senior's apartment closet was a treasure trove of the unknown, filled with various things like unfamiliar bills and unidentifiable objects. From there, he pulled out a regular file. What's that? Senior casually opened the file and began flipping through the pages. Scrapbook. I believe it's from about 2 weeks ago. Here it is. It was a small article. A 28-year-old woman committed suicide. The location was that building. I generally collect articles about accidents, suicides, and such. Occasionally, it comes in handy, Senior explained. Something like this would undoubtedly weird out most people. But now I understood why Senior, who lived in this apartment, skimped on food expenses. So, I'm pretty sure this is the same woman. The age, clothing, nothing contradicts, Senior confirmed. Indeed, it all matched. The age was likely around the same, and the woman I saw wore a uniform. The article mentioned she was working overtime, so she probably wore that uniform at the time. Oh, but it was her expression. That expression didn't seem like someone who was committing suicide out of despair. It looked more like surprise. You're right. The woman you saw probably didn't have the expression of someone about to commit suicide. Well, there's no point in dwelling on this here, Senior said as he got up. Let's go to the scene. Following Senior, who seemed to be enjoying himself, I also stood up. Excuse me, I'd like to ask. Senior spoke to the receptionist at the building with an unusual and friendly smile. I work as a magazine reporter, and I wanted to inquire about the incident from 2 weeks ago. It was a blatant lie. In normal circumstances, this wouldn't have been believed. Senior muttered something, probably a dismissal, while talking with the receptionist. After a short conversation, Senior bowed. Well then, excuse me. Wait, where are you going? I asked, and Senior rapidly ascended the stairs. I hurriedly followed. Senior, what was that just now? Do you really think they believed you? Nah, I just mentioned that there were rumors of ghosts. That guy over there seems to love that sort of stuff. He led me through without even listening to what I was saying, Senior explained. It was a ridiculous story. Well, around here, rural places like this might have that kind of relaxed security. So, what did you talk about? I inquired. Senior nodded and grinned, a different smile from the friendly one earlier, more characteristic of him. First, I was told not to enter anywhere except the rooftop. Then, he told me some details. Apparently, she worked in the top floor office. She was a cheerful girl, so no one expected her to commit suicide. I see. The receptionist seemed to have a liking for her. They used to chat about various things when she left. For example, he heard voices from the empty rooftop, Senior explained. I understood. Even in an ordinary building like this, you wouldn't hear voices from the rooftop down below. In essence, that rooftop conversation might be related to her suicide. Or perhaps even a murder. Hey, that door leads to her office. Of course, the ceiling isn't that thin. Then, as we went up one more floor. And this is the door to the rooftop. Let's open it. Click. The rooftop was a template. A concrete floor with minimal safety railings. There were no gaps in the railings, but it wouldn't be difficult for even a child to climb over them if they tried. It's more ordinary than I expected. Was it really a suicide after all? I asked, but Senior remained silent. We walked across the rooftop, and Senior stopped in the middle, gesturing for me to join. I stood next to Senior. Anything unusual for you? Senior asked. I replied with a deflated sigh. I couldn't see anything, and I couldn't hear anything. I see. Maybe she had a compatible wavelength with this place, or perhaps she was quite talented. Either way, she seemed to have some level of ability. That's why she jumped, Senior said with a neutral expression. His tone seemed tense, as if he was holding something back. Hey, let's go. We've got it all figured out, Senior said abruptly and quickly walked away from the rooftop. I hurried to catch up. The rooftop was a template. A concrete floor with minimal safety railings. There were no gaps in the railings, but it wouldn't be difficult for even a child to climb over them if they tried. It's more ordinary than I expected. Was it really a suicide after all? I asked, but Senior remained silent. We walked across the rooftop, and Senior stopped in the middle, gesturing for me to join. I stood next to Senior. Anything unusual for you? Senior asked. I replied with a deflated sigh. I couldn't see anything, and I couldn't hear anything. I see. Maybe she had a compatible wavelength with this place, or perhaps she was quite talented. Either way, she seemed to have some level of ability. That's why she jumped, Senior said with a neutral expression. His tone seemed tense, as if he was holding something back. Hey, let's go. We've got it all figured out, Senior said abruptly and quickly walked away from the rooftop. I hurried to catch up. So, how are you going to conclude this story? I asked as we returned to the apartment. Senior replied, it seems like you couldn't see them, so let me explain. There was an unbelievable number of various things on that rooftop. It was as if there was barely any space to stand. She probably followed the voices on the rooftop, and as a result, she saw them. I thought for a moment and asked, did she run away? On the spur of the moment? Senior nodded and traced his chin with his right hand. That's right. When I stood there, those things suddenly started inflating, like balloons. By the time I left, they were overflowing from the rooftop. I imagined it. Strange voices coming from the rooftop. Working late in the dark, alone in the office. Feeling uneasy, she decided to investigate the source of those voices. Let's find out who's behind those voices, she thought. She went up to the rooftop and looked for a place to hide, even though there was no such place. Meanwhile, the things up there started to expand. Suddenly, she noticed something unknown approaching her closely. She panicked. As she panicked, she heard the sound of a car passing on the road in front of the building. Trying to get their attention, she climbed over the railing and leaned out. So, it was an accident. That's why she had a surprised expression? I asked. Yes, it was an accident. But it was an accident that wouldn't have happened if she were an ordinary person, Senior replied. I had a question in my mind. Why did he say something like that? He could see them, and I could see them to some extent as well. It's as if having that ability was seen as a bad thing. You probably don't understand. While being able to see things that others can't is indeed a talent, it doesn't work as an advantage. It's a hindrance to living a normal life, rather than a blessing, Senior said. In my mind, there was a sudden realization. I had assumed that Senior was proud of his ability because I had admired it back then, longing to have it myself. There had been admiration in me, an unconditional admiration for those who could see. However, the people who possessed that ability saw it as a burden. I felt like my world had been turned upside down. You're my junior, but if you can, don't follow me. The world I see is far from normal, Senior continued. But even so, I began to say. Senior raised a finger to stop me. Even so, there will come a time when you have to make that choice if you say, even so. It will come eventually. When that time comes, and if you still say, even so. I would never forget the words that followed from Senior. He probably had foreseen the events that were yet to come. I wouldn't realize it until much later, but those words had deeply imprinted on my core. Outside, it was dim and cloudy, and the rarely falling rain began to drizzle. I thought to myself, I want to give you a gift from my heart. How was it? Strong talents come with risks, don't they? Talents that seem enviable from the outside might actually be difficult for an ordinary person to suddenly possess, precisely because no one really understands them. Furthermore, you may have such talents without realizing it, which could be why you find life challenging on a daily basis. If you ever feel like you're going through tough times, it might be helpful to think, I may have an incredible talent that I just haven't understood yet. If you have any other stories you would like me to introduce or any questions about the stories, please leave a comment. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Thank you, and stay tuned for the next episode.